This 8-year-old boy is too cruel. Just because his classmate rejected him, he used a wrench to hit him furiously. When his father sent him to the hospital, he stabbed him with scissors, causing a serious car accident. He stabbed the knife into the woman's abdomen, ending her life. Why was this little boy so cruel? The story starts a few hours before the boy was born. This car was driving on the road when a woman suddenly rushed out of the roadside. The driver braked urgently and quickly got out of the car to check. The woman raised her hand and kept shouting,
He took my hand.
The driver saved the woman. Soon, the police surrounded the murderer of the woman. The murderer walked out of the room naked and calmly. He raised his hand toward the police and was shot dead by the police. He fell to the ground in a pool of blood with the woman's severed hand in his hand. Meanwhile, a young couple in the hospital had just given birth to their baby, named Miles. Miles was born with 2 pupils of different colors. When the doctor injected him, he was calm and never cried. When he was 20 weeks, he learned to call his mother. Sarah thought there was something wrong with the baby. The doctor told her that her baby was probably a prodigy. Sarah was very happy to hear that. At the age of 2, Miles was able to build complex castles out of blocks. At the age of 5, his mother took him to have his IQ tested, and the results were ridiculously high. The doctor exclaimed that at this rate, his IQ would be comparable to Einstein's, but unusually, some areas of his brain were developing rapidly, while others were developing somewhat slowly. While the 2 adults were chatting, Miles was focused on killing a bug and didn't look at all like a 5-year-old. Time flies. Miles is 8 years old. He never ate spicy food, but suddenly offered to add some chili powder. Sarah was a little surprised, but didn't pay much attention. At night, the nanny stays home with Miles. Before going to bed, Miles asks to play hide and seek with the nanny. When the nanny counted to 10, Miles stared at her motionlessly. The nanny thought he wanted more time and continued to count blindfolded, not noticing that Miles' figure became larger and larger in the light. The nanny heard noises coming from the basement and thought Miles had hidden down there, so she offered to concede defeat and let him come up. Not getting a response, she had to walk down the stairs in the dark and accidentally stepped on the broken glass on the stairs. For this incident, no matter how the mother asked, Miles' memory always stays in the moment when the nanny counted. Looking at Miles blaming himself, Sarah could only comfort him. It was all just an accident. On Halloween, Miles dressed himself as a devil, carefully carved pumpkins, and his horrible expression was vivid. He looked at his half-makeup removed face in the mirror and thought about something. Late at night, the family's pet dog seems to be afraid of something. Sarah worriedly went into her son's room and found him writhing and mouthing incomprehensible words, and she recorded his words on a tape recorder. Seeing Miles wake up, Sarah asks him if he had a bad dream, but Miles said he had a good dream. Today's Miles not only behaves strangely at home, but also seems to be a different person at school. He wanted to do the experiment with a female classmate, but her partner refused him. On the grounds of going to the toilet, Miles took a wrench from the utility room and smashed it at the classmate who refused him. In the face of such violence, the school suggested that Sarah take him to see a shrink. The shrink took out a picture and asked him what it looked like, and Miles said it looked like a woman's hand. After some communication, the shrink was not sure what was wrong with Miles. Sarah gave the recording of Miles talking in his sleep at night to the shrink, hoping to find some clues from it. The shrink wondered if Miles had been abused to become violent. John shouted injustice because he was abused by his father when he was a child, and now he is even less likely to hurt his children. At night, Sarah couldn't sleep and got up to cover the quilt for Miles. When she was about to leave, she heard him swearing in his sleep and humming a song she had never heard before. Just as Sarah wondered, Miles suddenly sat up and said that there was someone in the room. The next day, the shrink referred Sarah to a specialist, Arthur Jacobson, who said that Miles was speaking Hungarian in his dream. The translation is, "Shut up, you filthy whore, stop crying or I'll cut your eyes out. I'm going to watch you die." Sarah can't believe Miles would say something like that. The expert continued to ask Sarah whether Miles's mood has fluctuated greatly recently, whether his preference for food has changed, etc. After receiving an affirmative answer, the expert offered a speculation. Miles' body is most likely inhabited by the soul of another person, All signs indicate that this person is very dangerous. Myers' real soul is fighting against his soul. Hearing this, Sarah got up and left, not believing that her son would have anything to do with these ridiculous words. The shrink gave her a CD and told her to watch it. In the evening, when Sarah played games with Miles, Miles hummed the song again and stroked her hand like an adult. Sarah jerked her hand back and asked who taught him the tune he was humming. An innocent-looking Miles, however, said that he had heard his mother sing it since he was a child. Hearing this, Sarah was surprised. She returned to her room and watched the contents of the CD, which was a report on reincarnation. John reassured her that Miles was just sick and that it had nothing to do with his past life and told her not to think about it. In the evening, she came to Miles' room, and the dog outside the door suddenly barked furiously.
Mommy.
Sarah turned around and Miles turned into an adult. Sarah holds her breath and walks over to see that Miles is still the same and thinks she is mistaken. The next day, the father found that the dog was missing and he took Miles out to look for it. Miles said the dog probably got hit by a car and is waiting quietly somewhere to die, and sooner or later Dad will die too. John was so angry that he almost wanted to do it. Miles said, "Do you want to hit me, just like Grandpa did to you?" But John never told him about his childhood domestic abuse. He thought it was Sarah who said it, and Sarah said she never mentioned it either. At this moment, John noticed something on the picture frame. He picked it up and saw that it was a modified camera. It turned out that Miles had been monitoring them. In the face of his father's aggressive inquiry, Miles looked innocent. He told his mother that he often felt his soul floating out of his body, as if he was making room for someone in his brain, and he himself did not know what was wrong with it. In the middle of the night, Sarah saw Miles standing in the hallway. Miles said he was scared and came towards Sarah, but suddenly turned into an adult-like figure and choked her. Good thing it was just a nightmare. After waking up, Sarah saw Miles really standing outside the door. He said that he was afraid alone and wanted to sleep with her. Sarah didn't refuse. Her heart was full of fear and she only dared to turn her back to him. At that moment, she suddenly heard a buzzing sound and got up to see the door crawling with flies. Sarah followed the sound to the basement and saw a puddle of blood on the floor, and the cabinet next to it was nailed shut, and she tried to open it. At this point, Miles slowly approached her with the hammer.
Mommy, use this.
He just came to deliver the hammer. Sarah pried open the cabinet and the dog's body rolled out of the cabinet. Miles cried and admitted all this and said that as soon as his soul left his body, he would do terrible things. Sarah finally decided to take Miles to a specialist. The expert intends to find out the other soul that has invaded the body through hypnosis and see what he really wants to do. According to past experience, Miles is already 8 years old. If we don't get rid of this invading soul, he will soon take over Miles' body. Under the effect of hypnosis, Myers began to twitch up. The two souls inside seemed to be dueling. After a roar, Myers began to calm down. From his eyes, we can see that another soul still occupies the body. Miles said that he had taken the drugs in the office, and if the experts continued to dig for the truth, he would tell the police that he had forced him to take the drugs and tried to violate him. Obviously, such words could never come from the mouth of a child. The expert had to compromise, saying that he had made a mistake in diagnosis and that there was no other soul in Miles. After seeing the moth, the expert found a name, Scar, on the sofa where Miles had been sitting. Late at night, he secretly called Sarah and asked her to immediately open the computer and type in the name Miles had secretly left behind, and if she could figure out what the spirit inside him was trying to do, she might be able to save Miles. When Sarah searched for the name of this person, the person who appeared was the same murderer who was shot down by the police at the beginning of the movie. His eyes were the same as Miles, both iris heterochromia, and Miles was born exactly 15 minutes after his death. In 5 years, he killed 9 women, and only the 10th victim escaped and survived, the woman at the beginning of the film. His hallmark of the crime was to cut off the victim's hand, and the only survivor wrote a book about her experience. Sarah told her husband about it, and they decided to send the child to a care home where someone could take care of him 24 hours a day. While packing for Miles, Sarah finds a hidden compartment containing none other than survivor Margaret's book. It turns out that the scar inside Miles has been collecting information about Margaret all these years. Sarah speculated that perhaps Scar's soul would only leave Miles' body if Margaret was killed. At this point, John did not know how terrible Miles was now, and he reluctantly told Miles that he would be sent to a care home, where there were very good doctors who could certainly cure him. Miles in the back seat looked shocked. He cut John's seat belt and then stabbed him with scissors. In the confusion, the car crashed into a nearby tree. Sarah rushed to the hospital. John was already unconscious and in a very bad condition. Looking at her dying husband on the hospital bed, Sarah is determined to end it all, bring back the real Miles, and get the family's life back on track. Because of the seat belt, Miles only had bruises. He was a face of aggression into the arms of Sarah, said he did not remember anything. Sarah buys sleeping pills and watches as Miles takes them. She wants to fulfill Skarka's last wish and kill Margaret for her thing. After driving all night, Sarah knocked on Margaret's door, falsely claiming to be her reader, having had a similar experience herself, and wanting to talk to her. Margaret wanted to refuse her, and considering that they were both victims, finally let Sarah into the room. During the conversation, Sarah learned that Margaret was also a mother and finally gave up the idea of killing her. By this time, Miles had entered the house at some point, knife in hand, and in a low voice he recounted the scene of that night to Margaret. Margaret instantly thought back to that terrible night, and she looked at the little boy in front of her incredulously. Miles took a sharp knife in his hand and stabbed Margaret in the abdomen. Sarah rushed forward to stop him, but was pushed away by Miles. He enjoyed Margaret's struggle and moved the knife back and forth in her abdomen. Sarah saw the whole thing, scared silly. After killing people, Miles calmly walked out of the house. Sarah tried to save her, but it was too late. She chased out and found Miles on his knees. When he turned around, his eyes were full of hostility, and it was clear that the one occupying the body was still Skark. Sarah asks him why you haven't left Miles' body when you've already fulfilled your heart's desire. Miles told him that the real Miles had died the night Sarah said she would always love him. Everything that followed was planned in disguise by him. Sarah couldn't believe what was happening in front of her. She pulled out her gun and tried to kill the demon who had taken over her son's body. A shot rang out, and it was Sarah who fell to the ground. Behind her was a passing hunter. The situation just now, in the eyes of outsiders, is a mad adult trying to kill a poor child. Miles put on a pathetic face and ran to the hunter, leaving Sarah lying on the ground moaning in pain. It wasn't over yet. Miles, who had no one to take care of him, was sent to a new family. Looking at his mistress' beautiful hand, Miles revealed an evil smile. After walking into the room, Miles looks at himself in the mirror and has turned into the appearance of Skarka. The plot of the whole movie is not outstanding, but it is full of horror. The wonderful acting of the little boy adds a lot of colors to the movie and reminds me of Emil in the movie The Bad Seed. In the film, the shot of the boy threatening the experts and swearing may be uncomfortable. Please watch it as appropriate.